I guess it was love at the first sight. Then I have started, and I have changed a little bit once and again. I have started doing playing the role of Scrum Master, Product Owner, team member for many different years. Then I have started my career as an Agile coach at team level, then at enterprise level. And back there in 2012, I've heard about SAFe for the first time. And my first art launched, it was back there in 2012. So that means 9 years or so, launching arts, helping trains, helping organizations to move, implementing SAFe, implementing Agile as well, trying to help them in the last years to perform their digital transformation using Agile and SAFe as a tool for that. And this is pretty much it, I guess. This is what I have been doing in the last 9 years, at least, for many different companies all around the world. Personally, I'm based here in south of France. I'm from Brazil originally, but I'm based in south of France, in a city that is called Antibes, that is just 15 minutes away from Nice. Usually we have a lot of sun, it's warm, so it's a very nice place to be. It's 7 years that I've been living here so far, and that's a nice place to be.
Great, thank you, Eduardo, for this. And I can only agree with you that Nice and the area of it is very nice. So
indeed.
So guys, basically, maybe let's start with some small rules related to this meetup. What we want to do. First of all, we'll talk with Eduardo about SAFe, success stories, challenges, things connected to it. But in the meantime, you can also ask questions here through the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask the question here, because Eduardo, Robert, and me will try to answer all your questions, because we want to keep the same formula for all our meetups. So with all our guests, we want to have same thing. So if you have questions, just maybe wait a couple of seconds. We will finish one subject, and after that you can ask the question. So this is basically all rules for this meeting, to be honest. So let's start with the question. So Eduardo, maybe as a warm-up for you, maybe let's talk about PI planning and big room planning, to be honest, because in my career in past, I had a couple of them into organizations, but during SPC training, I saw the video. I think that was from huge company, because the big room planning was like for more than probably 100 persons, to be honest. And if you can talk about it, explain this, maybe some insights, things like that.
Sure. Well, PI plannings are by far my most preferred ceremony in SAFe, in fact, because it gets everyone around and they are aligned around one objective, which is to create the best plan as possible for the upcoming 8 to 12 weeks, roughly 2 to 3 months, for instance. So everyone is around in order to achieve one objective, to help the organization to thrive, to come up with the best plan as they can, to try as well to anticipate the value delivery, for instance, to discuss, to solve issues, to raise dependencies, raise risks. This is the moment that the whole organization or the whole train, for instance, will be together. And this also, it marks, for instance, if you guys are familiar with the SAFe implementation roadmap, if you just Google it, or if you go to scaledagileFramework.com webpage, for instance, and you go to the bottom of the SAFe big picture, you're going to see the SAFe implementation roadmap. And the PI plannings, for instance, are the events that will launch officially the art. So this is a moment as well for the companies that are starting to implement SAFe to say, hey, listen, we are doing something different. We want to change the way that we are working. We are organizing now around value, and we want to make this a successful story, right? This is also a moment that you can invite other people from the organization to come and to see what you guys are doing, for instance, so they can also be motivated to implement SAFe or to do PI plannings on their own areas. With regards to the PI planning itself, I probably have coached as a coach or as a consultant, internal and external, probably, I don't know, maybe more than 100, for instance. So there are many stories to tell, and one thing is interesting about it. It's because people, they have high levels of energy and they are very creative on the way that they are going to interact, the way that they are going to discuss, and so on. So that's very interesting. Usually the questions that I have when I'm teaching SAFe trainings, for instance, or when I'm doing consulting as well, is, but this looks like a big mess, right? So how can you control this kind of thing? Well, the question is not how you control this kind of things, because you can't. But what you can do is to make an organized mess in that sense. So you plan a little bit up front. You have at that moment to have all the conditions in place, so the teams, they can start working with them and make it very efficient, right?
Yeah, I remember that at the first site when I took first time part of this event. For the first site, it was many people in the room, many things to do, and at the beginning, total chaos.
Indeed, yeah, and as big as the group is, or as much or many people you have, the bigger the mass will be, of course. The biggest PI planning that I have not facilitated, but coached, we had 700 people, give or take. And it was just amazing. In fact, the energy, the discussions, the willingness of people, the drive of people as well, that was really nice. Of course, it's not an event that you just decide one day and the next day you just go for it, right? You have to have a minimum of preparation for that. And especially today, with the pandemics, for instance, I guess the preparation is also key for that. Tools, what kind of subjects you are going to discuss, what kind of visual thinking tools you are going to use as well. This is very a lot important at this moment here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, as you said that at the one time you said you had 700 people, right?
Yep.
So probably it was like a couple of trains.
Yes,
launched,
exactly.
right?
We had 4 trains at the time, 4 trains. 3 of them were trains oriented to business, and one of the trains was oriented to a platform or an architectural train, if you will. So many different people, and they were organized around the solution train. That was the reason why we had this amount of people, in fact.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and from your side, what would be the biggest hint from your side to do in proper way this PI planning?
Yeah.
Biggest hint.
Yeah. So there are some key things that we have to think about when we start having PI plannings, or when we want to have PI plannings. So first thing is you have to think about the cadence, because this needs to be a cadenced event, right? So whenever you set the date, right, this is going to likely to be repeated over and over again in the next 8 to 12 weeks. The cadence should be the same. So that brings also the idea of predictability, right? We can plan for that, and we can start having the teams planning for that as well. The second thing is you have to engage with the leadership of the company, with the business owners as well, the ones that have stakes on what's going to be produced by the arts, for instance, and you have to ensure that they will be there. They are not just going to be there for 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the afternoon. That's not the point. because leaders, they have the power to change the organization, to challenge the status quo as well. But even more than just that, they have to support the teams, the agile teams that are part of the art. So leaders, business owners, they have to attend the PI planning 100% of it. So this is very important. I guess that if we are talking, for instance, about in-person or face-to-face PI plannings, one of the most common mistakes that I see companies they're doing is, instead of using a big planning room where you have all the teams around, they have one planning room, but they have the teams doing their plans in closed rooms with closed doors.
Yeah.
So how does that work for communication? It doesn't, right? So communication is broken. And I don't know about you, but Michal, for instance, but whenever I see a closed door, I'm kind of refrain to just knock on the door and to disturb people, right? So that doesn't work.
Yes, that's true. To be honest, I have the same feeling when I'm seeing closed doors. So probably someone wants to have privacy or something like that. So I can agree only that the PI should be in one big room where all the teams are on place and everyone can talk with each other. Without this, we will fail, to be honest, on such PI planning. Because I have seen in past some PI plannings where they took place, and after that, those plans were not quite good, to be honest. They were messy with a lot of issues, dependencies. So it looked like that. So yeah, everything should be in one place.
Yeah. And if you are in remote, for instance, you have to pay a lot of attention on the tools that you are going to use as well to facilitate the communication and not to be a blocker for the communication, right? Yeah. So in that sense, we have to rely a lot on the Scrum Masters as well. The RTE is not the only person, for instance, that will be facilitating this event. It can't be, especially on the remote side. But the RTE can work with the army of Scrum Masters to help facilitating the discussion, the communication, as well the process itself. It is difficult to do it in a remote, in a face-to-face environment, even more in a remote environment. The biggest remote PI planning that I have coached, it was back there in September last year, for instance, for a client here in France, and we had 250 people fully in remote, right?
Wow.
So that is crazy, but it works, and it works very well. But it requires you to plan in advance, to have backup channels, for instance, for communication, for the internet connection as well. You have to ensure that everyone has at least what the equipment that they need in order to perform a good job, which is not the case everywhere. You would be surprised by the things that I see in the field, but this is something that you have to reinforce as well. Okay. Another small tip I would say is to make it fun, right? Because the people, your people, our people, for instance, they will be really focused during 2 days, if in a face-to-face event, or some companies, they are doing splitting the PI plannings in remote over 2.5 days, 3 days, due to the time zone constraints, for instance. So make it fun. Try to select and to choose a theme for your PI planning every time, something different, and make it your own, and then try to plan for it. Try to plan some nice activities, some warm-up activities based on this theme, for instance, that you plan, that you select. Once I was facilitating a PI planning, for instance, and this group were just about releasing their product onto the market after the very end of the PI planning, for instance. And it was a coincidence, but there was the release of the last Game of Thrones season, and you see the winter is coming. So what we have done, we have taken this "the winter is coming" theme, and we have just adjusted a little bit to say customers are coming, because we were about to release our product to the market, for instance, just at the end, after the end of the PI planning. So we have created all of these visuals and the signs and the presentations, for instance, we're using this kind of theme, the motives as well. It was really, really fun. We've managed in fact also to have this throne, the Iron Throne, in the middle of the planning room, for instance. That was really, really nice. So make it fun.
Okay, great. Thank you for this hint. Eduardo, we have first question on our chat, so I will read it out. Eduardo, how would you encourage engineering teams to list dependencies from epics before PI planning? This seems to be the biggest stopper in my experience. In example, when the dependencies pop up casually during PI planning and dependency matrix become one big mess. Also, is post-planning meetups summaries a good idea?
Good question. There are many things, in fact, that you can do. Let's start thinking about what can you do on the preparation side, right? Let's take this way. If we are applying SAFe, we have an important meeting that happens once per week, or depends, twice a week, but it's called PO Sync, right? So this meeting is led by the product management. For instance, sometimes it's facilitated by the RTE, and it has two different objectives. So the first one is to take a look at how we are progressing, how we are making progress in the current PI. So this is a part of it. But also there is a component where we start discussing and preparing the content for the next PI, for the next PI planning, for instance. Usually that happens 1.5 months before the next PI planning. So at this point here, product management, system architects, together with the POs, they're going to start discussing, raising awareness as well. At this point here, it's still too incipient. What does that mean? It means that there are ideas, but we don't know that yet, for instance. We need a little bit more digging into that sense. So the POs, they will have also this responsibility to start digging a little bit on these ones without interrupting the teams, for instance. Because if we interrupt the teams, that means we are going to start creating a bottleneck, we are going to create queues, and then we are going to have delays in our delivery. That's not what we want. So first, POs do some digging, for instance. Another aspect in terms of preparation, for instance, is there is the IP iteration. This is something that is also very important. IP iteration, if you guys remember, for the ones of you that have already attended SAFe trainings or have done this one, so IP stands for innovation and planning. So on the innovation part, we are going to work with innovation, disruption, training, knowledge sharing, and so on and so forth. And on the P part, on the planning part, we are going to start socializing these features with the teams, with the team members. So as they are going to have an idea about what's coming next, what is going to come on the PI planning, right? They're not going to do a lot of work. They're not going to do a lot of research, but it's just to start figuring out what they are going to see in the future. Then during the PI planning, this is typically, we see the teams, they are raising dependencies, raising risks, dealing with them during the PI planning. Usually we don't have a lot of problem in that sense. What happens is that we see some problems happening after the PI planning, right? And these dependencies and risks, sometimes they just are not discovered at the right moment, and then they have to figure out. But then at this point here, and if you remember what is the objective of the PI planning, we are also creating the plan, or at least a high-level plan for each one of the iterations. But these plans, they need to be confirmed on the iteration plannings, right? So we are going to also make a link with what we have seen and what we have planned during the PI planning? Is it still valid? Is everything clear, for instance? Do we still need to discuss? Do we still have dependencies that we have to deal with, risks and so on? So everything is also done. We are going to recheck during the iteration planning. And if it slips, of course, it might be the case that over the execution, we are going to learn new things as well, because it's always as well a process of discovery. There is the backlog refinement meeting during the iteration that we can use for that. So there are many different places that you can have. One tip though is, I don't know if that's what you have seen, for instance, but one tip is take a look at the program board during the 2 days of the PI planning. If you see lots of strings, red strings everywhere, connecting many different functionalities in the teams, lots of dependencies, and so on and so forth, right? That might also be an indication that your teams, they are not set up on the right way. So you observe that for one PI, and if that on the second PI it happens the same, for instance, that means that you have to revisit the setup, the design of your train, because one of the objectives that we want when we set up trains, for instance, is to minimize the dependencies between the different teams. And if that's not the case, it might be one, it's a problem with the design of your teams. Number two, the way that we are structuring the backlog. So you might have these two different reasons why you have all of this much dependencies and red strings absolutely everywhere. So do the preparation, confirm that, or at least go a little bit deeper during the IP iteration. Do the job during the PI planning, confirm during the iteration planning, and if there is still something remaining, that's why we are going to use the backlog refinement. And look at the program backlog. This is going to give you very good hints if you have the right setup, if you are structuring your backlog the right way as well. It's a long answer. I hope it helped.
Yeah, Bartek, I hope that you got your answer for your question. If not, then you can add additional questions. So just think about it.
And of course, guys, you can jump in. We can always warmly welcome to hear your voices directly. So just don't hesitate.
Okay, so moving forward, maybe I will ask one additional question to you. I think it might be hard because I don't know if you have met this during your job or not, that sometimes safe is maybe in other words, people are thinking about safe that this is not Scrum, this is not Agile way, this is not even not sometimes connected to it, that safe is putting a lot of constraints over the process. So what do you think about it, and how you would talk with such a person to show the value coming from safe approach?
Yeah, that's a question that I have over and over again, and I see many different comments in this sense as well. So I don't think so. To start with, this is the way that I see this is an honest question. In fact, it's an honest question because people, they don't understand what safe really is, right? So whenever we are talking about safe and or any scaled agile framework, if you will, right, we have three different rules when to scale, when we think about scaling, right? So the first thing that you have to think about, and whenever you have the need to scale, the first rule is say no, don't scale, right? The second rule and the second answer will be no, don't scale, don't scale, right? And if you make the question a third time, for instance, at this moment, If you have the need, then you scale, and then you start thinking about different frameworks for scaling Agile, right? And then at this point, it might be the case that you are going to be presented to SAFe. That's nice. I really liked SAFe. I have been working with SAFe. It's been already 9 years, roughly. And I see all the sizes of companies everywhere using SAFe. As for instance, on the last State of Agile report, for instance, 2020, SAFe is by far the #1 framework used in the world, with 35 or 38% of the market, give or take, right? So if you sum up all the other frameworks, the next 7 or 8, it's still SAFe has a bigger market share in that sense. So that indicates something to start. Second, SAFe is built upon the Scrum principles, the Scrum framework as well, and Kanban as well, because the teams that will operate within an Agile release train, they are using either Scrum or Kanban. And if you take a look at the other levels of SAFe, if you take a look at large solution and portfolio, we are using Kanban absolutely everywhere, right? The idea behind SAFe as well is to be built upon Scrum basics, right? And then what happens is that we are going to use the same Scrum pattern, and we are going to apply on the different levels of SAFe. Let me give you an example. In the teams, we have 3 different roles. We have Scrum Master, we have Product Owner, and then we have the developers, right? Regardless of the version of the Scrum guide that you are going to use, or if you take an interpretation from SAFe, for instance, where we have 2 specialty roles in the team itself, which is Scrum Master and Product Owner. But regardless of that, we have Scrum Master, Product Owner, and the developers, right? If you scale up in one level, you are going to still keep the same 3 roles or ideas behind. So the RTE is the Scrum Master of the train. The Agile team that we had in the Scrum or the Scrum team, now in a scaled environment, is called ART, Agile Release Train, is a team of teams, an Agile team of Agile teams. And we've took the Product Owner role, for instance, and we've scaled up this role as well, for instance, but then it's a lot of work just for one person, right? So what happened is that we have split these responsibilities between product management and system architect, right? So you see, this is the pattern that we have on the essential level when we talk about the art. But it's exactly the same if we go one step further on the solution level. It's the same if we go one step further on the portfolio. We have the lean portfolio management. We have an APMO that will facilitate the meetings, that will facilitate the process as well. And we have epic owners that will propose items for the teams and for the value streams and for the trains to be doing as well. So this is talking about the roles, for instance. But if we talk about ceremonies, if we talk about iteration planning, for instance, at the team level, we have the same at art level. It is the PI planning. So that's the idea. We have retrospective. In an art, we have the inspect and adapt. We have the review, right? In the art, we have the system demos. We have the PI system demo as well. So we are building we are extending, in fact, the same concepts that we have in Scrum over and over again in different levels. This is what we call the fractals. So SAFe is built using this fractals, which is the repeating patterns just in a different scale. Mm-hmm. So it's, if you will, we used to say that SAFe is Scrum on steroids.
Okay, thank you for this answer. In the meantime, we got another question. So,
yep.
Do you think SAFe takes empowerment from product owners?
If the question is if SAFe removes the power from product owners, is that correct? Is that the right understanding?
I think that we can rephrase it like that. Joanna, if you can agree on chat or not, if you can rephrase it like that, will be great. But in my thinking, I would rephrase it as you said. So
Okay, so let's take this perspective, and if that's not the right perspective, please just let me know. Okay. To some extent, yes, right. If you think about Scrum basics or the team level Scrum, we are talking about one team that has one Scrum Master, one product owner, one product backlog, and most likely this product owner will be the one discussing with the team, with the customer, for instance, with the client, regardless if it's internal or external. So in that aspect, for instance, yes, safe. In the same way, other frameworks, they say, okay, we need to start taking a system thinking approach where it's not enough to have a team that is optimized, because now we are creating more bigger and complex solutions, for instance. So we have to start thinking about the bigger objective. And then we start thinking about the train, the organization, and so on and so forth. So in that sense, and specifically about this point, for instance, contact with the client, constant prioritization based on the client. So this is now something that is done by product management, for instance, right? So the product owners will be working now with product management. Of course, they in real life, they can go and they can see the clients and the customers together with product management. But if we just take a look at this perspective, in theory, that's now a responsibility of product management and no longer from product owner. All the other things in terms of prioritizing the team backlog, working with the team to iterate towards the optimal solution, being responsible by defining the content that these teams will be working on, this still stays and remains exactly the same. It's just now that we are working for a greater good, which is deliver value as an art, as a big team of teams. I don't know if that helps, and if answers your question, just let me know.
yeah.
So Eduardo, can we say that in SAFe, product owner is more representing the tactical level, and the product manager is more responsible for strategic point of view?
It might be one, yes, it can be one interpretation as well, right? If you just think about the other levels of safety, upper levels like large solution and portfolio, for instance, where we start having different pictures or different roles like solution management, epic owners, business owners, for instance, these are the guys as well that are thinking about the strategy or the strategic items that we want to accomplish as a company, right? And this is going to drill down. This is going to go through the different levels and will achieve the product owner, for instance, that is, of course, in charge together with the team to define the tactics, how we are going to do it. What is it that we have to do and how we are going to do it for this bigger objective as a company, for instance. Does that answer your question, Robert?
Yep.
Good.
Okay, so Eduardo, what about let's say success story of implementing SAFe, and maybe not only the success story, but if you had situation that maybe implementation have failed or had some bigger issues.
Yeah. Maybe we can start from the not so successful stories.
Okay.
Okay. One of the things that I see where the organizations, one of the reasons why they fail is when they start working in SAFe, implementing SAFe, for instance, and they change without changing. What does that mean, in fact? So they are going to have ceremonies, they are going to have PI planning, they are going to have RTE and all the other roles, if you will, but then the real functioning or the real changes, they are not introduced, right? And I see that happening many times, in fact. not because they are bad people, not because they have chosen the wrong coaches or consultants or even the people that are part of the organization, but because they've lacked leadership support. Number second is because the culture of the company pushes back. I used to say that the strategy of the company, not this, this is a sentence from Peter Drucker, strategy culture eats a strategy for a breakfast. And I used to say that the culture of the company eats agile for a breakfast. And I see that happening absolutely everywhere. Changing without the real change. Also, a second thing, and I have seen that happening in a company somewhere, and this company, for instance, they have created one art that was part of one department, with the director taking the role of the RTE, for instance, but not really playing this role, right? And then he came to me and he said, yeah, you know, Eduardo, I've liked this RTE role. It's very nice because it's someone that is going to talk to everyone and so on. And then I said, yeah, indeed, you are right. But do you think it's a good fit for you? And he said, yeah, I like to talk to people. So that's great, but it's not the only thing, right? And then I have started listing the activities, like, for instance, facilitating PI planning. Yeah, this is something that I could do. Okay, but what about the premises, the facilities, the tools? No, but for this, I have my secretary that can take care of this. Yeah, but what about talking with product management to prepare and help to prepare the content, right? Oh no, but for this one, I have my senior managers that they can take care of this. I can delegate to them. And then this person delegated most of the activities, but being in the stage in front of everyone, opening the PI planning, right? I don't need to tell you that it was a huge failure, in fact, because they changed without changing. And they've tried for 3 PIs, and then they have stopped because nothing changed, nothing ever changed, right? So that was an interesting failure in terms of safe implementation.
Eduardo, if I may, before you continue, we have another question from our colleagues, so I will read it out loud to let as well Facebook guys hear it. So, would you have any tips for an organization where only a part is working in the SAFE framework, but this part is dependent to a large extent on the deliverables of the non-SAFE part, working in a waterfall-like setup?
Yeah, very good question. And this is way more common than you can imagine, in fact. If you take the perspective of the safe implementation roadmap, you are going to see that at one given point, what we are going to do is what we call the value stream and art identification workshop. At this workshop, we might identify, I don't know, 10 arts, for instance, but we are going to select one, the one that has leadership support, that has a significant challenge. It's not the most or the more challengeable or challenging area of the company, right, either, but it has a significant challenge. We are going to talk about having the right conditions, the right will of the people to change. And then we are going to start designing this art like this. What happens in reality is that most of the case, and to come back to my previous point, for instance, the organizations, when they come through, when they go through this designing process, they design for the organizations that they already have, and not for the organization that they want to have or they want to be part of. So this is a big mistake in that sense. So we select one art and then we start. It's a small art, I don't know, 50 to 125 people, even 100 people, for instance, right? And you are going to see that for that specific art, all the surroundings are still waterfall-ish, agile-ish, or whatever the other ish that you can imagine, of course, right? So my advice number one would be try to go through the value stream and art identification workshop, so you can isolate and you can design your art as it should be from an end-to-end perspective, delivering value, real value to the customer. So that is tip number one. Tip number two for you is, this is a situation that you can afford to be part of over the course of one PI or two PIs, for instance. After that, things start to be way more complex and people will start being tired of that, and there will be complaints and people just, well, you know what, nothing ever changes, so let it go, and we don't care about it anymore. So whenever you change, you have to help people as well to sustain the change. So you've launched your art, it's not really working well. The next step is, what is it that I need to do in order to help this art to function better, right? And then at this point here, you go through the value stream and art identification workshop and embed the leaders as well, but also during the PI planning, this is also a key part of it as well. Whoever from wherever part of the organization that your teams, they need to have in order to perform the plan, you have to invite them to the PI planning, right? I have participated in PI plannings, for instance, where we had these small arts, but they had other 20 suppliers and third parties and even customers, for instance, that they were dependent from, or they were dependent, or they were dependent on this art. So we have the need to bring everyone on board. So during the 2 days of the PI planning, or if in remote, for instance, the 3 or 2.5 days, they have to be there. All the suppliers that you need, all the representatives of the other teams that are not part of your art, clients, if you need as well, you invite them to the PI plannings. So this is, in a very, very high level, how you can start effectively changing things, or at least try to diminish the impact of not having everyone around.
Okay, thank you, Eduardo. I hope that answer is on place and everything is fine with it. In the meantime, we've got next question for you. So our audience started to be active, so this is good. Thank you guys for it. Question is, let me only scroll it. How to explain the lack of attractiveness of safe DevOps in France? While in so-called agile organization, the lack of maturity with regards to DevOps health radar assessment is quite glaring in certain activities. I'm thinking, among other things, about continuous exploration, as well as many skills in other aspects: continuous integration, continuous deployment, and release on demand.
It's a very interesting question. I imagine that it was made by a French participant.
We cannot help you with that.
Let me try to build onto this. It's to be fair, it's not only in France that this happens, right? This is something that we see in many different places, regardless of the country. In fact, people, they still think, and this is what I see. This is what I see in real life. People still think that doing DevOps is bringing a team that will do integration that as part of the art, right? And it's a special team that does only that, or that they will only operate the system, but as they are part of the art, that means that the art have DevOps. That's not what we expect, right? When we think about DevOps in SAFe, we say DevOps is a mindset, right? Is a culture of shared responsibility, is automation of the continuous delivery pipeline, lean flow, measurement, and recovery, right? So we take care of all the different aspects, all the different phases that are part of the continuous delivery pipeline: continuous exploration, continuous integration, continuous deployment, and then release on demand. But this is a responsibility that needs to be part of each and every single agile team that is part of this art. So if you have development teams and if you have one team of operations, it doesn't mean that you are doing DevOps. It means that you have dev and that you have ops. The problem is still stands, right? So we want to have people that are responsible by everything that they do. And in the trainings, for instance, I used to say that if you create dog food, you have to eat your own dog food, right? So you have to be responsible by whatever is it that you create from an end-to-end perspective. And in that sense, in most of the cases, what we recommend is to blend developers and operations people in one team, and they can really put in place this responsibility from an end-to-end perspective. They are really doing DevOps. You are responsible by everything that you create, in fact. There is still this misunderstanding. You have dev and you have ops. That means you have DevOps. That's not what we expect. That's not what we want, right? And I see, to come back to the question, I see many companies in France doing exactly this, dev and ops, but never DevOps as we expect, right? So that's one of the reasons why things are not working very well in the DevOps side in France, but more generically speaking in many other different countries. Another aspect as well is that we are still very reluctant in investing in automation and infrastructure. We still think that these are very expensive things, and we should invest this money in another type of things, right? That's wrong, because when you invest on automation and when you invest on infrastructure, you are also saying we want to speed up the delivery of the value, get a feedback early and often, pivot or persevere, and have the ability to change and to change the course of action, or to go to another direction, for instance, as quick as possible. But it requires as well investment. It involves some cost, and leaders, they are still reluctant to invest an amount of money on this because they don't see the real value of it. So it's our job to bring this perspective to them. So DevOps accelerates the delivery of the value and is an enabler for the continuous flow of value as well.
Okay.
I hope this answers the question.
I see, Eduardo, we've got one comment from Fatima. I'm currently providing safe DevOps remote training with only 4 people who are totally amazed at the power of DevOps. So
Absolutely, yeah. When you first know DevOps and you get the idea behind, for instance, is just an eye opener. In fact, it's really nice.
okay. So maybe let's get back to my question, because we talked about this success stories, but we didn't talk about the success of it. Less successes than success.
Yeah. So one success story, for instance, in my company, in Gladwell, for instance, we also do consulting as I have mentioned before, right? One big success, one of the biggest in the world as well, is a big transformation that we are still working on in a company that is called ASML in the Netherlands, for instance. So as we speak, we have about 6,000 people that are working split into many different trains, for instance. So the overall idea from ASML, for instance, was that they have grew from a company with 15,000 employees to a company with 80,000 employees, right? So 5 times more, a little bit more than 5 times bigger in just 4 years. So they had all of this complexity of organizing the work, helping the people to thrive on their roles as well. Communication started to become a real issue, and they have chosen SAFe as the operating system for them. And it's proven so far that they have got very good results on that. They've reduced a lot the lead time to deliver new machines. For instance, they create machines, big machines that create other machines. For instance, if you have a mobile phone, for instance, they have their chips, they have their processors. For sure, you are using something that was produced by ASML, which is a company that came from Philips. If you Google it as well, and it's completely changed their perspective, and it was a game changer for them as well. And we have helped them to transform this much of people, but they still have a long way to go with the other areas as well, as you can imagine. For instance, this is a very, very good story. One thing though was a big enabler: leadership support. Going SAFe was a decision of the company and not just from one team or another team, because this is what we see in reality, right? It doesn't matter if you just have a bottom-up approach. At a given point, you have to have the top-down, and these two, they have to meet in the middle, in fact. Otherwise, you are going to reach a given level, and it's never going to pass and expand to other areas.
So basically, empowerment is always needed.
Absolutely, yeah. And this is something that the only ones that they can do is the leadership.
Right. Okay, guys, we are approaching to the end of our meeting. Only 5 minutes left. Do you have any question to Eduardo before we will end? If yes, you can speak up. It will be a pleasure to hear your voice, or you can post it on our chat if you wish to. So maybe let's give a couple of seconds and we'll see.
May I make you, Michał, a question?
Oh, go ahead.
So, what were the biggest challenges that you have faced while trying to implement SAFe, for instance?
To be honest, I think the biggest problem, maybe not problem, but issue, let's call it in that way, was with the organization, to be honest, because we were planning at the lowest level where we had teams, as you mentioned, product owners and scrum masters, but this was only planning on this level. After PI planning, nobody was like checking those plans, what to do, what dependencies do we have, and things connected to it. So basically, the PI planning, like we, as always, took 2 days to do it. And after first sprint, after PI planning, everything was different. So I think that this is the biggest disadvantage which I can see on my side in the implementation of SAFe, that some organizations are implementing this on the lowest level, but they are not transforming, they are not putting it also to, as you mentioned, to the top management, to other people in the hierarchy of our organization. Without such a support, as you also mentioned, it will fail. And in most of the cases, we've got only elements of SAFe within organization, not the full SAFe as we want to have. So, but I don't know if mixing up, to be honest, some parts of SAFe, some parts of Scrum, sometimes even some parts of less will help this organization, or it will do like a roadblock for it. So this is how it looks like.
Yeah, that was a good challenge, right?
Yeah.
And I will tell that I had the pleasure in the very first attempt with SAFe acting as Scrum Master. Had the pleasure to during those times to work in the art that only consisted with 2 teams, right? that was just ridiculous because the entire organization adopted SAFe. So everyone on the top said that whenever you feel the opportunity, let's do SAFe, even for arts that are just only made by 2 teams. So that I recall what and as some bad choice, and this is how you said in the beginning with the scaling rules. If you consider scaling, just don't do it, right?
Don't. Yeah, just don't. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So, okay, guys, I don't see any more questions. So I think that we can close our today meetup. Eduardo, once again, thank you that you have joined us. Thank you for your knowledge and your time. And also, I would like to thank our audience because they had some of questions which were very interesting to ask you and to hear your opinion. And at the end, I would like to say that the video from this meetup was recorded, so it will be available for everyone on our YouTube channel or on our blog on our web page www.zwinnazmiana.com. So if you would like to recommend it or you want to once again see it, you will be able to do it. Probably I will do it today in the evening, but please give me 24 hours to do it in case of anything.
And the other things, guys, that was the very first meetup. And if you have any kind of feedback, the good one or the bad one, we all want to create this community to serve you most. We want to improve. So any good or bad word would help us improve, meaning inspect and adapt always. We feel it in the bones. And as well, if you have any kind of problems, issues, challenges that you would like to elaborate more, just make us some brief messages and we can arrange some special dedicated meetups just only for workshop kind of style, right? So feel free to do it.
Yeah. So thank you very much, everyone, for staying here and listening to our conversation. It was a pleasure for me to be here. As I said before, anytime that you want to invite me, it will be a pleasure, of course. If you have other questions or if you have any doubts, you can send me through LinkedIn or you can contact the guys, Michael, Robert, Robert as well. Add me on LinkedIn as well, and it will be a pleasure to have a conversation with you as well. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. So have a great evening.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.